So today we're going to read part 2 of chapter 10 about stage 3 and stage 4 of the birth of civilization in the Near East in Joe Campbell's Primitive Mythology. Stage 3, that of Neanderthal man, circa 200,000 to 75,000 BC, reveals in Central Europe the earliest dependable evidence found anywhere of an establishment of myth and rite. Ceremonial burials with grave gear and bear skull sanctuaries in high mountain peaks. Professor Weckler has suggested that Homo neanderthalensis may have come from the Oriental zone, pressing west across the tundras into Europe, where he was the first to use fire. Sinanthropus, it will be recalled, who had already captured fire as early as circa 400,000 BC, was a cannibal. So also Neanderthal man. We have mentioned the evidence of the open skulls at Krapina and Eringsdorf. But in Java, too, a number of such open skulls have been found among the remains of Solo man, Neanderthal's Oriental contemporary, and these were opened precisely in the way of the skulls of the present-day headhunters of Borneo. Neanderthal and Solo man, therefore, may have practiced some form of ritual cannibalism in connection with an early version of the headhunt. And if so, the formula should perhaps be carried back even to the period of Plesianthropus, who killed and beheaded men as well as beasts. In which case, this grim cult might reasonably be proposed as the earliest religious rite of the human species. But now, with respect to the earliest employment of fire, a curious problem arises when it is realized that although the heavy-browed family of Sinanthropus crouched around its hearth as early as circa 400,000 BC, and that of Neanderthal man circa 200,000, those lusty brutes gobbled their meals of fresh meat and brains, whether human or animal, absolutely raw. For it was not until the period of the far more highly developed races of the Temple Caves, circa 30,000 to 10,000 BC, that the art of roasting was invented. But then why the hearths? It has been suggested that they were used to heat the caves, and this indeed would seem to have been the only practical end to which they were turned. However, even if this were the case, one would still have to ask by what accident Sinanthropus could have learned that the blast of a forest, prairie, or volcanic fire could have been turned to such congenial use. A possible answer is provided by the Ainu ritual of the mountain bear ceremonially entertained during his night-long conversation with the goddess of the hearth. For the fire in that context was not a mere device for the provision of heat, but the actual presence of a divinity. The earliest hearths, too, could have been shrines where fire was cherished in and for itself in the way of a holy image or primitive fetish. The practical value of such a living presence, then, would have been discovered in due time. The suggestion is rendered the more likely, furthermore, when it is considered that throughout the world the hearth fire remains to this day a sacred as well as secular institution. In many lands, at the time of a marriage, the kindling of the hearth in the new home is a crucial rite, and a domestic cult comes to focus in the preservation of its flame. Perpetual flames and votive lights are known practically everywhere in the developed religious cults. The Vestal fire of Rome, with its attendant priestesses, was neither for cooking nor for the provision of heat. And we have already learned of the holy fire made and extinguished at the times of the installation and murder of the god king. The hearth, then, the mountain sanctuary of the bear, and the ceremonial burial with grave gear, animal sacrifice, and perhaps occasional ritual cannibalism. These, in the period of Neanderthal man, supply our chief clues as to the religious life of the broad Middle Paleolithic province, documented from the Alps to the Arctic Ocean, eastward to Japan, and south to Indonesia. But where the mythogenetic zone and where the diffusion zones within this vast area may have been, we do not know. Though surely the earliest points of reference thus far discovered are the bear skull sanctuaries of the Central European peaks. And finally, as to the question of other possible mythogenetic zones and ritual syndromes developed during the course of this long period, whether in Africa, Western Europe, or Southwest Asia, nothing has yet been found that could be read as evidence. However, it is entirely possible that the cults of the female statuettes and temple caves, which appear abruptly in the following period, were in the process of formation during this earlier darker day, but have left no evidence. For where wood is abundant as a material for sculpture, and leaves, bark, feathers, etc. for ritual masks, no remains survive. Some part of the great primary field of the tropics, therefore, may have been the mythogenetic zone for the earlier stages of the cults that abruptly appear already fully formed in the documented late Paleolithic areas of the Golden Age of the Great Hunt. Stage 4, then, circa 30,000 to 10,000 BC, reveals the mythology of the naked goddess and the mythology of the temple caves. The richest finds of the first of these two complexes have turned up in the Ukraine, though the range extends westward to the Pyrenees and eastward to Lake Baikal. Provisionally, therefore, the Ukraine may be designated as the mythogenetic zone. And this likelihood is rendered the more evident when it is considered that many of the basic elements of the complex were to reappear in the Neolithic goddess cults of the 5th millennium BC, directly to the south on the opposite flank of the Black Sea. The relationship of these two goddess cults to that of the Ainu, fire goddess, is probably extremely remote. They appear to have stemmed from different mythogenetic zones. Nevertheless, in the areas of their diffusion, they undoubtedly met and possibly were amalgamated. And finally, of course, both represent the imprint of the permanent presence previously discussed, namely woman. The second mythology of this important era, that of the great temple caves, is definitely centered in northern Spain and southern France, the so-called Franco-Cantabrian zone. And though the cult may have commenced as a provincial form of some earlier massed ritual of the men's dancing grounds developed in areas to the south, it achieved here a character and ritual investment of such force that the area must be regarded as our first precisely pinpointed mythogenetic zone. One, furthermore, from whose truly marvelous amplifications of the symbology of the labyrinthine chambers of the soul, every one of the high religions and most of the primitive also have received instruction. What a coincidence of nature and the mind these caves reveal. And what an evocation it must have been that drew forth these images. Apparently the cave, as literal fact, evoked in the way of a sign stimulus the latent energies of that other cave, the unfathomed human heart. And what poured forth was the first creation of a temple in the history of the world. A shrine is one thing, a temple another. A shrine is a little place for magic, or for converse with a divinity. A temple is the projection into earthly space of a house of myth, and as far as history and archaeology have yet shown, these Paleolithic temple caves were the first realizations of this kind, the first manifestations of the fact that there is a readiness in man's heart for the supernormal image, and in his mind and hand the capacity to create it. Here, therefore, nature supplied the catalyst, a literal, actual presentation of the void. And when the sense of time and space was gone, the visionary journey of the seer began. The fashioning of an image is one thing, the fashioning of a mythological realm another. And the remarkable fact, it seems to me, is that for all their complication, these caves, or at least a number of them, are conceived as units, with outer and inner chambers of increasing power. Consider, for example, the composition of the upper cave at Lascaux, with its scenes of the happy hunting ground and its curious wizard beast with the pointing stick horns. And then below, in the crypt, the shaman and master bull, upon whose magical accord the whole happy hunt above depends. Or consider at Trois Frères the long flume of the difficult approach, the difficult journey leading to the great chamber of the animals, where the only form with emphasizing paint upon it was the dancing shaman. In this latter case, we are dramatically confronted by a new thing in the world, the use of a change of art technique to render a magnification of power. And then finally, at the cavern of Touc-Audouber, the visitor passes first through beautifully painted chambers and then clambering through a very small entrance, which the boys who discovered the cave called the Cat's Hole, and going through which their father, the Count Beguin, got stuck and had to forfeit both his shirt and his trousers. One arrives in the sanctuary of the connubium of the two divine bison, who are rendered not in paint, but in bas-relief, not in 2 dimensions, but in 3, so that here, once again, the possibilities of art were being exploited, in a way never known before, to communicate the sense of a heightening of the spiritual power sphere, the placement of the shaman in the crypt of Lascaux, the emphasized form of the dancing shaman of Trois Frères, and the plastic rendition of the bison pair of Touc-Audouber speak volumes for the degree of aesthetic sensibility of the artists of these caves, who were greater men by far than mere primitive magicians conjuring animals. They were mystagogues, conjuring the minds of men. And so it is, I believe, that we can say that in the mythogenetic zone of the Franco-Cantabrian caves, the rendition in art of the mythological realm itself was achieved for the first time in the history of the world. All cathedrals, all temples since, which are not mere meeting houses but manifestations to the mind of the magical space of God, derive from these caves. And I would say also that we have here our first certain sign of the operation of the fertilized masculine spirit, the upbeat to La Divina Commedia, and to all those magical temples of the Orient wherein the heart and mind are winged away from earth and reach first the heavens of the stars, but then beyond. Though within the earth and in these caves we have left it on the wings of a dream. And this already is the wondrous flight so beautifully rendered in Gregory of Nyssa's image of the wings of the dove, as the primary symbol of the Holy Spirit, whereby our nature, transforming itself from glory to glory, moves on without bound or ultimate term toward no limit. For the soul turned toward God, fully committed to its desire for incorruptible beauty. For the soul turned toward God, fully committed to its desire for incorruptible beauty, is moved by a desire for the transcendent ever anew, and this desire is never filled to satiety. That is why the dove never ceases to move on toward what is before, going on from where it is now, to penetrate that further to which it has not yet come. It flies into the shadows, and the shadows continually recede, yet are ever there. For the shadows through which the dove is flying now and forever are neither more nor less than the incomprehensibility of the essence or being of the divine. We'll stop there for now, and next time we'll pick up with stage 5.